You've probably heard of Which Magazine, our home of hard-hitting journalism and informative stories delivered directly to our members. There's our travel, money and tech mags too. But did you know you can hear some of our best articles for free, available to listen to whenever you like? Each week on the Which Shorts podcast, we bring you a specially selected story, lovingly voiced and produced especially for you on a whole range of fascinating topics. Just search Which Shorts wherever you're listening.
When life gives you questions, Which? Get answers.
Welcome to the Which Money Podcast, your weekly hit of money news and personal finance hacks to help make you better off. I'm your host, Lucia Ariano, and here's what's coming up this week.
So I think this comes down to two things. I think the cost of living crisis, people have less disposable income now. They're really keen to kind of shop around and find a bargain, but also an increasing awareness of the environmental impact of fast fashion and, buying new things from high street stores.
A lot of people now are making more conscious decisions to actually slow down their shopping habits and trying to shop in these secondhand spaces where actually they can find things that are beautiful.
This week on the podcast, we're talking about charity shops, why more of us are choosing to shop secondhand for clothes, and how charity shops are upping their game. We'll also be delving into secondhand clothes apps, tips on how to grab a bargain when looking for something pre-owned, and plenty more. And to help me with all of this, I'm very pleased to say I'm joined by Which senior content writer Hannah Downs and Emily London, a sustainable stylist and vintage fashion seller. Hello to you both.
Hi there.
Hi.
Well, thank you both so much for joining me. I'm so excited for today's show because I am a seasoned charity shopper. So I love charity shops. And Hannah, maybe if you want to start us off, how popular are they? Are more people choosing to buy pre-owned clothes now?
Yeah, so I'm also a huge charity shop fan. I've definitely noticed a shift towards secondhand shopping in recent years. A lot of my friends who wouldn't have gone in a charity shop a couple of years ago are now huge charity shop fans and are buying from apps like Vinted, eBay, Depop as well. And I've also noticed an increase in TikToks of people kind of showing their charity shop hauls, showing what they managed to find for 25 quid or whatever. And the charity shops that we spoke to have actually confirmed this trend as well. So Cancer Research and the British Red Cross told us that footfall in their stores has risen to above pre-pandemic levels. And also the Charity Retail Association, they did a survey in the last quarter of last year, which found that in-store and online income for charity shops had increased against the year previous. So I think this comes down to two things. I think the cost of living crisis, people have less disposable income now. They're really keen to kind of shop around and find a bargain, but also an increasing awareness of the environmental impact of fast fashion and, buying new things from high street stores.
Well, of course, that there is that aspect that, it's more than just fashion when you're buying from a charity shop, isn't it? And so you say increased footfall. How are charity shops responding to that? Have they?
Yeah, so I thought it was really interesting that almost half of the charity shops who responded to that Charity Retail Association survey told us that they intend to increase the number of shops over the coming 6 months. And a lot of the charity shops we spoke to actually told us about stores they've recently opened. So the British Heart Foundation has opened stores across the UK in Dalston, Coventry, Cameron Toll, Edinburgh, Romford, and then the British Red Cross opened a specialist bookshop recently in Hay-on-Wye. I've also noticed that a new Mind Shop has opened near me in Kentish Town. And this was really notable, kind of given the number of high street stores that are struggling at the moment. A lot of really big retailers have gone bust or, are struggling to get customers in the door. So it feels quite remarkable that charity shops are kind of bucking this trend and, are kind of getting new shoppers in all the time.
I absolutely love hearing you talk about all of this. As I mentioned at the top of the show, I am a seasoned charity shopper. Since I was a teenager, when I left school, when I left sixth form, I won an award like, I don't know, this person that spent the most in charity shops in Bedford, which is where I'm from. So I really do love charity shops and I always have. Emily, can you talk to us a bit about your experience? I know that you've done a lot of work for the British Heart Foundation. What's your experience been like? And, how do you think people are using charity shops at the moment?
I have been a charity shopper for probably over 30 years. So I was very small when I started nicky nacky newing, as I used to call it with my granny.
That's
so
very
it used
cute.
to be a pastime. We would go and just look for treasures, really lovely, nice things. And that sort of need to find that perfect thing always stayed with me. So as a teenager and as a young woman, I continued to do it. And even as I entered into fashion journalism, working for women's magazines, even though I was commenting and reporting on what was happening on the runways, I was still charity shopping. And actually, my love of fashion and also my sense of self and personal style was really realized in the things I was finding in charity shops. And I think that's what a lot of people are discovering now. I think people are very much more aware of the impact their personal decisions have for the community, for the planet as a whole, when it comes to buying clothing. And so a lot of people now are making more conscious decisions to actually slow down their shopping habits and trying to shop in these secondhand spaces where actually they can find things that are beautiful, that have value, that are great quality, that are really well priced, that again speak to their true style, which kind of transcend the trends and the fast fashion sort of marketing messages that bombard us all. So I'm not surprised that charity shops are really having this sort of spotlight at the moment.
I was nodding away as you were talking then, because for me, that's exactly what you mentioned about it helping you find your personal style. You do find those pieces in it, and it did really inform my style and kind of my self-expression. So there is just so much to it. And I suppose then, shall we bring in these secondhand shopping apps? Because there are lots of them around at the moment. Popularity is rising. I mean, firstly, Hannah, do you want to talk about these like Vinted and Depop? For anyone not familiar with them, how are they working?
Yeah, so Vinted and Depop work quite similarly to eBay. So they're secondhand marketplaces where you can list unwanted things that you want to sell, and then likewise you can buy things from other sellers who might have listed things that they don't want anymore. So the different apps will be good for different types of products. Vinted and Depop are really good for finding secondhand clothes. Depop, I found sort of more kind of designery, higher end items, and Vinted you can find cheaper bargains, I would say.
They really just make me think of vintage shopping. When I was a teenager and I started, I was kind of going from charity shops to vintage shops and back and forth. And I'd come to London and there'd be a few vintage shops, whereas now we kind of all have access to these online or on our phones. How would you say these secondhand apps have impacted charity shops? Do you think they have? Have they impacted them? Has it had a good or bad effect?
As somebody that has also worked in charity retail, I was a charity shop manager for a couple of years for the British Red Cross. I was really aware of the impact, and positively, of charities actually running their own eBay channels. And I'm sure that there are charities now operating through Vinted as well as a means of raising more money and selling clothing through those apps, because, like you say, they are very, very popular with a certain demographic of people. I also think that because they are so popular and so easy to use, and we are currently living through a very, very tricky time economically, people will be using these apps to sell items that they may have donated to charity shops. And I just anecdotally, walking down my high street, most of my charity shops, and there are about 8 on my high street, which I love, but all of them have requests in the window for donations. So it's a good thing. I think it helps people sell the items they no longer want, and hopefully those items will then have a second life with another person. But it may mean that decisions are made where you're not actually taking donations through the door of your nearest charity shop.
And to go back to a point you just made about charity shops using these apps themselves, I wanted to ask you, are charity shops doing anything to evolve and keep up with all of these changes? That sounds like an example. Can you talk to us a bit more about those kinds of things?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you walk into a charity shop on your high street, it's not the one that you remember from your teenage years. Recently, on my high street, Crisis opened a charity shop. And Crisis, like Shelter, like the Royal Trinity Hospice, over the last 4 years, they have made huge efforts to merchandise their stores in a way which I now think they look like boutiques. They are really showcasing their donations in ways which look truly compelling, really seasonally appropriate, and just they make the whole shopping experience come alive. Whereas before, I would try and make my friends come into these stores where they were a bit like a sort of glorified jumble sale, and it was a bit harder to persuade people to enjoy the experience. Now, when you walk into these stores and you see the beautifully designed windows, you see the color-coded rails, I think it's really exciting, and it makes you want to stay. It makes you want to explore. And so I think that has to have a positive impact on the charity shop experience as a whole. And it must really change people's perceptions of buying and wearing secondhand clothes.
It's quite amazing, this boutique feel, isn't it? And I know exactly what you're talking about. There's a charity shop just down the road from me, which does exactly that. And it does make it a really pleasant shopping experience, as well as, all the other factors that you get shopping at a charity shop. And Hannah, is there anything that you'd like to add there about, how charity shops are kind of keeping up with all of these changes?
Yeah, so a lot of charity shops are kind of capitalising on this kind of rise of popularity of secondhand marketplaces. So as Emily kind of mentioned earlier, a lot of these charity shops do have seller profiles on the secondhand platforms. So Cancer Research told us it lists up to 4,000 items online per week. And it has a huge amount of followers on its eBay shop, Depop shop. And the British Heart Foundation says it sells over 440,000 items each year. And it's always recruiting retail ambassadors who then have an influence on TikTok and Instagram. So I think charity shops are being really smart in how they're adapting. As Emily kind of mentioned, they're curating their in-store offerings really well, but then they're also really embracing this move towards secondhand marketplaces and having a real presence and impact on those platforms as well.
That's a really great tip to look out for these charity shops, but on the apps, because I've honestly never heard of it, and I'm using these apps, so I will have to have a look myself. And interestingly, we will talk a bit more about donating after a quick break. But just before we get there, are these charity shops putting a different selection of items on these apps, or are they still clothes that are kind of being donated through the traditional means, people taking them into stores?
In my experience, I think it's a bit of both. What tends to happen is that stores will receive donations, and if they have something truly bizarre, strange, they're not sure if they will be able to sell it through their actual shop, they will then send it to their eBay team or whichever team is working on their digital platforms, and it will be sold on their behalf. So I know that some people feel that all the good stuff is now not in stores, it's taken and tried to be sold on eBay, but I would still say that you still find plenty of amazing things in shops, but it tends to be the truly unique pieces that will be sold on eBay and Vinted and those sorts of places.
Well, we'll be talking more about those and how to find a bargain after the break, plus some advice on what stores actually want if you're looking to have a clear out.
Scammers are stealing hundreds of millions of pounds every year. They bombard us with fraudulent texts, emails and calls. And what's more, their tactics are getting increasingly sinister. To keep across the latest scams, sign up to our free Scam Alert service to help you stay ahead of the latest scams and protect yourself. Go to which.co.uk/scam alert-newsletter. That's which.co.uk/scam alert-newsletter. Thank you.
Welcome back. Well, can we start with some kind of shopping advice then? People might be wondering, where are the best places to go? Which stores are best? Generally, what are the kinds of do's and don'ts maybe of thrifting in charity shops?
Well, I think seasonality is a big one. So I managed to pick up loads of really good stuff in January this year, just after Christmas. I got an Arket sweater vest that had never been worn for £7, which was just amazing because I think they retail at £80, some of them. So that was a really good find. And when we spoke to charity shops about this, they did mention that they often get a spike in donations just after Christmas. So I think, people having clear outs or donating unwanted gifts, things like that. And Cancer Research also mentioned it gets a peak in donations around March, April time. So obviously we've just missed that this year, but one to remember for 2025. I think another one, a lot of charity shops have specific stores for specific types of products. So there's some great charity shop bookstores near me. There's a Oxfam Books and an Amnesty International bookstore near me, and there's often a lot of the bestsellers get donated there. So I'll often wait to pick one of those books up from there rather than buying it new. You also get specific furniture shops. So there's a really big British Heart Foundation furniture store near me, and there's always loads of good stuff in there. And then one that I hadn't come across before, British Red Cross actually has a bridal boutique with new and used wedding dresses in its Edinburgh store. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
There's a fantastic bridal and prom dress charity shop, which is in Whitley Bay, and it's the St Oswald's Hospice store, which my mother-in-law's sister volunteers at. And all of their wedding dresses are £150, and they range from sizes 6 to 30. And they have rooms of beautiful mother of the bride and formal wear. And it's amazing to see the work that goes into bringing these clothes back to life. All the wedding dresses are hand washed, and the donations they get are absolutely extraordinary. I would say that if you're in that area, it's definitely one to go to. And also another great, if you like your vintage and you want to shop in a charity shop, Retromania in Pimlico is absolutely fantastic. That is a Farah charity shop, but they only sell vintage clothes. So all of the vintage pieces that are donated to a Farah charity shop are sent there. And it's just off the Warwick Way in Pimlico. It's fabulous.
And what about donating then? What kind of advice or, do's and don'ts would you give here? What do stores want? Emily, do you want to take this one first?
Absolutely. I would say that it's really important to call ahead if you want to donate to a specific charity shop and actually find out if they are looking for specific things. So my local charity shop is desperate for menswear. So then I would, if they need menswear, I'll see if there's anything that I can donate to them. I would also check probably their website to see if there's anything they don't accept, because there are certain things charities can't sell, and it's just a waste of your time and theirs if you want to try and give those things to them. Plus, I would say, think about the condition of the items you want to donate. If you'd be happy to give that to a friend of yours or a colleague, that's absolutely the condition that the item should be donated to a charity shop. And if it's an item of clothing, do give it a wash, but don't worry about ironing it, because most charity shops will steam all of the pieces that they have before they put it onto the shop floor. So it's just sort of basic housekeeping, really, before you donate those pieces. And don't leave. If you see a closed charity shop, do not leave donations outside, because charities get into all sorts of trouble with the council and for doing things like that.
I've definitely seen bags left outside charity shops that have kind of just been ransacked or got rained on or whatever, and it's just really such a shame. And I really wanted to ask you about gift aid and how this works. Hannah, can you give us an intro to charity shops and gift aid?
So gift aid is like a tax relief, and it allows UK charities to reclaim an extra 25p for every £1 you give. You can sign up to gift aid, and then when you make your donation, they'll often ask you, are you registered with gift aid? And you kind of just give your details. And my friend had an interesting experience recently. So when he moved house, he donated quite a lot of things to his local Mind store. And this was at some point last year. And then out of the blue last week, he got an email from Mind that revealed that his donations had actually made them over £680, and that gift aid had then added on an extra £170 to this. So that's quite a significant kind of extra bump, isn't it? And he really didn't expect these donations to get that much, kind of nearly £1,000. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting example of how gift aid can really bump up your donations.
And I feel like we've talked quite a lot about donating versus selling, but it would be good to just bring that back. And Emily, get your thoughts on why donate and not sell, especially given, how difficult it's been for many people, the cost of living crisis. What would you say about donating over selling?
I sort of see the charity shop sector and the secondhand fashion world as an ecosystem, and it's a very delicate one, and I want to contribute to its health. So as much as I like taking from it, as in buying beautiful things, I also want to make sure that there's still more things out there for other people to enjoy. So that's why I do donate regularly and often, because otherwise you're sort of not really contributing to this wonderful world that I get so much pleasure out of. So that's what I see. But that is a judgment. And there are definitely times when I do need to sell something just because I need to raise a bit of cash. So it's not a sort of judgment call if other people don't follow suit. But in my experience, donating and speaking to the teams and realizing that you're contributing to such a special cause, whatever that cause may be, I get a lot of pleasure from that. I think that's what other people would experience too if they did the same thing.
Absolutely. And I feel like just before we leave, I really want to ask you, let's bring this a little bit to life. I know you mentioned that Arquette find earlier in the year, Hannah. What are some of the things you found shopping at charity shops? Because I feel like you're going to have some great stories.
Oh, I've found all things, honestly. I've probably my biggest find was an Hermes scarf for £4 in a charity shop 2 years ago. That kind of blew my mind.
Wow.
It was the bargain of the century, and I will love wearing it for years and years and years to come. I've also found beautiful things which I have enjoyed for decades. So I love Prada, and I found a Prada bowling bag in a charity shop. And it was £69, which is, a lot of money. But these items resell for £300 to £400, really. So I was very lucky, and I enjoy wearing it all year round. And I'm also an absolute cashmere fiend. Love wearing cashmere. Don't want to pay the 300 odd pounds that some cashmere companies charge. So I have found beautiful cashmere jumpers by Joseph, Zadig and Voltaire, Aquascutum for between £5 and £20, which again I love wearing all year round, and it's worth the worry about moths and all that jazz to enjoy the sensation of it. So yes, I think I've found pretty much every single designer brand ever in a charity shop.
Wow.
And it's been a real pleasure finding it and rummaging through all the rails for sure.
And Hannah, I can see you nodding away. I feel like you've got something to add that's exciting.
Yeah, well, I found my Burberry Mac in a charity shop for like £70, and I wear it all spring, all autumn.
Wow.
So that was great. And I think maybe my first ever charity shop purchase when I must have been like in year 8 or 9 or something. And I found an old school Polaroid camera.
Oh, that's nice.
And it only worked that summer, then it broke. But I remember taking it to all the parties thinking I was really cool with my big Polaroid camera. So it just shows you can find some really interesting, I love vintage, so you can find some really interesting vintage stuff in charity shops. And it always just feels like, you just feel like lucky to have found it, to have been there on that day, to have found that item before someone else had. I don't know, it's just like a special shopping experience.
No, it's so much better than the high street. It's just... Yeah. And you get to meet the most wonderful people as well. It's the whole package.
Yeah, and kind of crockery bits, bowls, plates, like nicely kind of glazed pottery, kind of the kinds of things that you might spend 20 or 30 quid on for an individual one at, say, I don't know, John Lewis or wherever. You'll find like some amazing like one-offs in charity shops, or even sets. I've definitely found some of those. Well, I feel like we could talk about this for the next hour, for the rest of the day, and I'd be very, very happy to do that. But we do have to wrap up. Emily, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show as well. Where can people go to find out more about you?
Thank you. You can follow me on Instagram. My handle is Emily London, or you can check out my website, which is emilylondon.co.uk, for all sorts of vintage and charity shop fun.
Oh, what a lovely episode this has been. Thank you both so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, a huge thank you again to Hannah and Emily for coming on the show today, and to you for listening to this week's episode of the Which Money podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please do hit subscribe to make sure you catch our new episodes as soon as they drop. For daily money news and advice, you can find us on social media at Which Money and online at which.co.uk/money. And we also have a free money newsletter, which is delivered to your inbox every Monday. To sign up, visit which.co.uk/money newsletter. This episode of the Which Money podcast was written by me, Lucia Ariano, and produced and edited by James Rowe.
Like listening to podcasts just like this one from the team at Which? Well, we've got some good news. All our podcasts are now available to listen to on YouTube and YouTube Music. So whether you like listening to Get Answers, Which Shorts or Which Money, all episodes can now be listened to directly on YouTube or through the YouTube Music app. To find them, just search for the podcast you'd like to listen to. YouTube's additional functionality also means that you can now read along with subtitles as you listen. Don't panic though, all Which podcasts are still available to listen to elsewhere too. So wherever you listen, we'll see you soon.